Hey guys, this is Holly from HS Crested and back again with another tutorial. This time I'm going to be showing you guys how I make my naturalistic habitats. I've been meaning to do this for a while, and this footage is actually pretty old. Most of the habitats have been updated. This is just a heads up, there's going to be a lot of talking in this video because there's a lot to explain, so hopefully it doesn't tick you guys off too much that you get to hear my voice through the entire video. This is actually a fairly simple project to do. It just requires a little bit of patience and, you know, correct proper placement and some time. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to start off by going over your shopping list a little bit. You will need some basic tools like scissors. The plastic sheet cutting tool you can actually buy at Home Depot next to the polycarbonate sheeting. It should be right next to it, along with the silicone for plastics. I personally use Great Stuff foam. I love it. I've been using it for all my projects. So far it's worked great. You'll need, you know, a Sharpie, 10-pound Velcro strips, which I prefer, you know, you buy in bulk, like in the giant packages that cost $20. It's so worth it though. That is for the screen top that I won't be necessarily showing you how to do, but I'll do a brief overview of it. It's really simple. You'll need a vacuum to clean out all the extra wood chips. You'll see in the video I did not use one, but it makes it so much easier if you do, so it's optional. You'll also need a metal file to file down the piece of plastic before you install it to make sure it won't hurt your gecko in case they jump on it. You will need a fish tank, which, you know, could be any size for the most part. You'll need Repti-Bark to cover over the foam that's exposed. You'll need wooden dowels. The thickness that you choose depends on how heavy your cork rounds are. The cork slabs we'll be using as the background for the tank. I suggest natural cork slabs and not the like fake foam stuff that you can kind of just insert back there. It's not thick enough and there needs to be room behind for the dowels to go through. You'll need lots of fake plants. There's a little star on there, you see that. Whatever plants you do choose to use, you need to make sure that they are sanitized, and you can do that by either boiling the plants or soaking them in hot water for a very long time. And you can use craft store plants. The plants that you'll see in the video I actually got from Michael's Arts and Crafts store. You'll need some Eco Earth or paper towel for substrate, and the thin plastic sheeting is just to cover 2/3 of your screen tank top, which you'll be using for your door basically. And this is to help hold in humidity and to also make it so if your gecko goes to the bathroom on the plastic sheeting or the screen top, it's not going to go through the little holes and make a mess everywhere. So to start off, this is the fish tank that I'm going to be using for this project. I chose a 20-gallon tall. When flipped on edge, it has a little bit more depth, so basically it leaves more room for the cork rounds, so you can have longer ones in there and also more room to explore. As for cork, depending on the size of your tank, one giant piece like the one shown here that will fit perfectly is fine. This is an example of a cork round. Basically it is like the hollowed out branch of a cork tree, and you can cut it in half. You can use any sort of size that you want depending on the animal that you're getting. This one's pretty thin. You want to make sure that there's enough room for your animal to fit through completely to the other side. And this is one of the wooden dowels that I use for the project. I think it's 3/8 of an inch. I don't necessarily remember exactly how large it was, but basically you'll need pieces that are as long as your cork rounds. So on top of your cork, you're going to need a lot of plants. Basically you can buy any sort of craft store plant. Avoid anything with glitter or anything that has exposed wires. Avoid anything that might have glue strands or something on it. To make sure that they're safe for your animal, you want to make sure to soak them in very hot water for, I'd say, about a half an hour to an hour, even longer if you can wait. Or you can do a quick boil for about 15 minutes if the plants will handle it. I would do a test with a smaller part of the plant to make sure that it doesn't melt, especially if it's made of plastic. And this will make sure it'll kill off anything. You'll see on this plant here, I'll show you in just a moment. Basically, sometimes with the plants, because they're not meant for habitats like this specifically, they can have little wires sticking up through the leaves, so make sure to do a thorough check of all of your plants before you do anything with them to make sure that your animal will not get hurt if they climb onto them. The thing I like best about craft store plants, especially for Michael's, is they're really high quality, so they look really realistic when put together and placed properly in tanks. Especially with some smaller plants placed here and there for some flair, it looks really nice. So on top of all those supplies, you're going to need some Great Stuff gap filler. That's going to be for your background. You can see here that I already added some water to some eco earth that I had left over. These were in the puck form, so basically I'll have to break them up. You'll see me doing that in just a couple minutes. I suggest if you don't have any sort of bioactive setup and you want to keep your habitat a little more sterile, you use really hot water. I found two benefits with this, was because one, it kills off basically anything living inside of it, so you'll have some nice fresh clean dirt to use in your habitat. And two, basically, I swear it soaks up about 5 times faster using warm water than it does with cold. The eco earth just tends to soak up hot water a lot faster than it does cold, and also, for a third bonus, when you're breaking it up, it makes it a little bit easier to manage as well. So I'm just doing a little bit of cleaning up first, throwing things all over my bed. Basically, I have a very small room, so I use a desk on top of my bed as a table. I'm just doing a test fit. You always want to test fit your cork to make sure exactly where you want it to be placed before you actually use the gap filler to stick it to the back. It's almost like super glue in the sense that once it sticks, it does not want to come off. You're going to be filling up that entire inside area in the back of it with the foam to make sure that the gecko can't get behind it so they can't get trapped, and also to make sure that there's a connection between the bark and the tank. Those extra pieces of cork are just in case you want to fill in some extra little holes here and there that might have otherwise exposed foam to the habitat. So when preparing your tank to actually put in the foam and the cork, you want to make sure that your glass is clean, and also you're going to kind of guess about where you're going to put the cork. You can always, write it on the glass itself with a Sharpie and trace out the cork, but I don't find it necessarily important. You can always just guess. Anything left over that is extra, you can always wipe away with a paper towel or something like that. Always wear gloves. I'm not wearing gloves here, but it's suggested you do because, like I said before, this stuff is like super glue. I've gotten it stuck to me many times, and it takes at least a couple days to peel off your skin, and that's probably not healthy for you. You want to make sure that when you put the cork in, too, that it goes straight down, and you try not to get any of the extra foam anywhere on the exposed cork, meaning any area that your animal can easily climb on or access. And like I mentioned before, you're also going to wipe away any extra foam that isn't necessary at all and is just going to be in the way. I couldn't record this because past this point you'll start to see my camera starts to have some sort of overheating problem. Sony problems. Basically, your next step is you're going to fill the entire tank and cover over the entire piece of cork with either Repti chips, or you can just wait until it cures and dries. You can put silicone over it and then use dry eco earth to pour over the silicone so it sticks to it. It'll look more like dirt, not so much like wood, which is why I like to use the Repti chips. Although eco earth would be a safer option, definitely for your animal. I would never use Repti chips, especially with crested geckos, as a substrate, mainly because cresties are very clumsy, and if they lunge at a cricket and they get a mouthful of chips, they'll try and swallow them, and it will cause impaction. So this is the plastic that I ended up going with. I used Lexan. There is a cheaper option, which is right next to the Lexan, but at the time they were out of stock. Obviously, on top of the plastic, you're also going to need silicone made specifically for plastics, otherwise it won't stick to the plastic sheeting and it might come off in the future. So once all your foam is completely settled, which should take a couple hours, don't rush it, believe me, the cork might fall off, you can basically go in and get rid of all of the loose pieces of wood chips. This is where having the vacuum makes everything so much easier. I would suggest, if you do hand scoop this out, or even if you do use the vacuum, to throw out the wood chips afterwards because they've been exposed to chemicals and you don't want to reintroduce that to your habitat or have your animals be exposed to it for any reason. So as you can see towards the top here, you can see some leftover foam. I'm not too worried about the little bits of foam that are exposed. I'm going to cover most of that up with plants. Really dense plants to make sure that they can't really climb up there. If you're worried about it, you can always just put some silicone on top. I personally don't find a problem with it. And here you can see I'm sizing up the dowels. You can basically just make quick little scores in the dowel and then simply break it off. The rough side you want to face inwards towards the cork, and if you have two rough sides on one end, I suggest going back with some sandpaper and rounding that edge to make sure your animal doesn't get hurt. So basically this is where you begin hammering in your dowels. You can use any sort of hammer to smash them in, I personally have it on an angle towards the top of the tank, as you can see, so when they slide in, they're angled upwards so extra water drippings run down to the cork slab in the back, and also so your animals can actually get through into the cork slabs through the back and they don't always have to enter from the front. You can see here that I'm hammering in a pair of scissors. I'm sure there's a better option for this, but it was the only tool I had available at the moment. You can make a hole either with a drill or another sharp object, hammer it in, just to kind of make a hole beforehand for the dowel to go through to make sure that it actually gets all the way through to the back. Cork can actually be pretty tough in some spots, like apparently it was here, where I decided to hammer the dowel in, so it took a little bit more work to get it in. And you can see I flipped the tank now, so I'm test fitting the tubes to make sure that they fit a certain way, if I need to trim them at all to make sure that they don't stick out too far, so when I put on the door there's nothing in the way to bump it or make it stick out at all. So, on to fitting your piece of plastic. Personally, I like to do this after I put in all the cork and everything, mainly because I don't want to bump it after it's starting to set and working on the tank. I like to do this as one of the last steps. But before you do any cutting, you need to make sure that you measure the inside lip there of your tank to make sure that it fits almost perfectly. Even if you're off by a couple millimeters, it's okay, because you'll be filling it in with the silicone for the most part. You can just draw directly on your plastic sheeting with a Sharpie like I'm doing here to mark where you're going to make your cuts. The way that I found to cutting the sheets is using a hard, straight ruler like the one that you use to measure, and just scoring along next to it, and you have to do this quite a few times to kind of start to break down into the plastic sheeting. I'm sure if you had some sort of other cutting tool or something like that, like a Dremel, it would go a little bit faster, but I believe this cutting tool was only $5 or $6 at Home Depot, so it's really worth the money. And finally, once you've made your scores, try and get it at least halfway through the plastic so you don't struggle as much as I did trying to get that piece to break off. Before you put it in there, you're going to want to file down one of the edges, the edge that's going to be facing upwards, just to make sure that it's rounded off. So if your gecko jumps on it, it's not going to get hurt. You're going to do any sort of test fit first, obviously. If it's just a hair too big, you can go back with the file and round it off. But if it's a perfect fit, you can go right ahead and start to silicone. You can fill in that entire gap there with silicone, and not too much, but you know, worst case scenario, if you put too much, it's not going to hurt anything. You're just going to fill up that entire area to make sure that it's basically sandwiched between two layers of silicone. So there is a secure seal on both sides of that plastic, just to make sure that there is absolutely no possible way that it could leak. The piece of plastic here I used is about 3 inches tall. I don't have any personal use for a drainage layer, I wish I would, but if you do, just add another couple inches to that height. So after that has completely set, maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour, I would give it an hour just to be sure, you can go ahead and start adding your plants into your habitat. Basically, my idea is to have a couple vine type things hanging down from the top of the cork to make it look like it's almost growing out of it. So that larger plant that you saw before, I trimmed off some things and made them individual little strands, so it'll really look a little more naturalistic and realistic. You'll see exactly how much I fuss with the plants because I'm very particular about how they look, but you know, obviously you don't have to do this much detail. You can kind of just stick in some of the plants here and there just to make life a little simpler for you. You can see here that I pretty much added in all of those vines that I wanted to add, so now I'm adding in those individual plants, the bunches, the ones that are a little on the thicker side to kind of fill in some room in the tank. Again, those require a lot of fuss because you want them to look just right. Not that it matters because the geckos are probably going to trample them anyway. But basically, you know, place them sporadically. You can have some long, big-leaved plants. I know they sell some really nice-looking ones at Michael's, and they normally have sales, like I mentioned before. Obviously not sponsored. My channel is way too small for that. A little trick that I learned with the plants, you'll see here, is basically you can fit them in behind the cork and into the foam. It'll really keep them secure, and also it'll kind of make it look like it's growing out of the back, so it doesn't so much look like it's just a straight wall. When you put multiple habitats next to each other, they do tend to look like they're growing into each other. And then that's basically it. this is how to put together the lid. I'm going to do just a brief overview of it. Basically what I do is a 10-pound Velcro strips on the top and the bottom. This is a larger tank. This is a 29-gallon tank. So anything 29 and above, I use 2 tiny little support strips in the center, and basically it just comes right off, comes back on. It's really helpful. The plastic in the middle is to help keep in humidity, like I mentioned before, and to prevent messes from your geckos from getting everywhere outside the tank. So, big reveal, this is the final habitat and everything that I added to it. I did end up adding a 3rd cork round to the bottom. You can see those big plants at the top. I added in some flowers. Towards the bottom you'll see the eco earth, and I added in some extra moss as well to help keep in humidity. The flowers are really great. I got those from Dollar Tree. Those need some extra soaking time because of the dyes, but otherwise they're perfect to use. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, guys. If you have any suggestions or anything like that, anything that you think I didn't explain properly, just let me know in the comments and I'll try and explain my best. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more DIY videos and other fun stuff.